people do. Everyone's an individual. Everyone's different. So, but yeah, he got a few good years out of it, and yeah. But I was so relieved once he rang me and said, "No, Dad, that's it. I've had enough." I went, "Thank God."
So you're keeping everything crossed that there isn't a third generation then, or a next generation?
Well, my sister's boy, Harrison Ryan, he's starting to show a little bit of potential, but he hasn't really got his heart 100% into it, and you can't really succeed if it's not on your mind 100% of the day and all that sort of. He likes doing a lot of other things, so yeah, still in the family. People still riding around, yeah. So yeah, but we don't really go to many meetings anymore. Maybe 1 or 2 a year.
Yeah, I mean, people I'm sure will know who we're talking about, but if in case you don't, it's Taylor Poole we're talking about. I often wonder with kind of father-child speedway kind of families, whether you ever get to race together. And I know it doesn't often happen because of the age gaps and what have you, but did you ever just take some bikes out and local to you and kind of do some practicing around, so you're both on your bikes and your gear?
No, not really. On dirt bikes we did, but not on speedway bikes. Unfortunately, after my last accident, I can't really ride a speedway bike anymore because of one of my legs. You wouldn't know if I'm walking around. I don't limp or anything like that, but I can't ride one properly. And it would have been nice to have a few laps with him.
Yeah.
I've seen, I think the only father and son I've ever seen was probably Phil and Jason.
Yeah.
They actually competed against each other at Gosford one night. But yeah, we did ride in one meeting at Tamworth. He was in the junior class, I was in the senior class, and I think I got injured maybe in that year. But yeah, unfortunately I never did, but it would have been good fun. I'm sure he would have beaten me too.
Well, only because he was then younger and you were getting older, I'm quite sure.
Well, it was funny when the first time he ever rode at Peterborough, I think he won his first heat, and it was and because I used to ring him after every meeting. Obviously, like I said, I was watching it on updates, and I didn't really take much notice of the race time or anything, and I never used to when I was riding anyway. And I rang him after it, and I said, "Oh, you done okay?" He goes, "Yeah." Went around Peterborough faster than you've ever been. Have a look at the race time. Yeah. I said, "Yeah, but track's different now. It's a metre shorter." Yeah. So that was quite fun.
You got upstaged in what you do. I understand you do a bit of fishing now. How does that go for you?
Yeah, it's good. Luckily, we're not far from the water here, and it's good fishing around here. And I've got a little boat that Michelle and I go out, and she always catches more fish than me or bigger fish than me, and so I'm still trying to keep up with the family.
I've probably only ever had about 2 occasions when a rider has refused to talk to you on the phone, or when you see him, and that is sort of tremendous. That they're still not too busy.
Yeah.
That they have to ignore you. But it's some of the tracks some of the clubs did a couple of years ago start to hold more or less press conferences in the bars.
Right.
I know Kings Lynn were one who did it, and I think that maybe helped for the supporters to meet them. But I think even the other side, probably, I don't know, did supporters even go in bars after the meeting the same? Yeah, with drink driving, very few of us will go into a bar and have an alcoholic drink. We might have a soft drink because we all know that we can't drink and drive. So it's just a pity there isn't another way, isn't it, of getting that relationship between the fans and the riders. But they still attend functions, don't they? They attend supporters club functions, and they're always very approachable. Like you don't hear of riders refusing to sign an autograph for the little 6-year-old kid who is desperate to see him. They now all do selfies, don't they? You've only got to look on Twitter. You know, the number of times you see a little lad or a little girl, you know, on Twitter with a selfie with their particular hero at their particular track. You know, people like sort of Chris Harris, like he's always on Twitter, isn't he? Photographed with somebody else, and you know, and giving these people, these youngsters, you know, for the occasion of their lives. Because I think one of the hardest things for sportsmen to appreciate is exactly what it means to someone who watches them, to actually meet them and to be photographed with them.
Yeah,
and I think that was always the great thing, was that you know, I'm you know, a lot older than you, but I could go to the first Speedway meeting and I could get an autograph of the rider, and I think that still applies. But as you say, there isn't that post-meeting links.
No, but as you say, I mean, that's really interesting that there's a cultural shift across the sports, as you say, you know, because I mean, certainly we do a podcast, sister podcast with snooker, and of course in the day, I mean, you know, you'd have your likes of Hogan Higgins, wouldn't you, and people like that, all with the smoking away, all with some alcohol on the table next to them, and you know, that's completely gone. And as football, I mean, I did think about a podcast. I'm a Forest fan, and I thought, oh, that'd be interesting, although there's enough of them around for football. But actually, I just thought I probably won't be able to speak to many of them. And when you watch them on TV, I mean, you're Liverpool, but you know, as you watch them on TV, how often do you watch them? And when they're not playing, they're covering their mouths up, even if they're just talking to a colleague, because they don't want to be quoted, or you know, it seems the more focus on them, the shyer they get in a way, which maybe is not surprising.
I think the football clubs themselves are, you know, much responsible for that, because I know, again, I had a long career, you know, writing about football for a national paper, and you know, my contacts book was full of the numbers of literally hundreds of footballers. You know, that's from, you know, Kevin Keegan, Bobby Moore, all the way down. You know, these days, journalists don't even have the phone numbers, because the footballers are so protected by their agents, by their security people. Like, who could have imagined that a footballer would have 2 burly security guards taking him out from the, you know, the dressing rooms, through the players' lounge, out to the car park, so that he walks, what might it be, 50, 100 yards at the most to his car, and flanked by these sort of burly, you know, security guards. That is, you know, thank God that has never come to Speedway. You know, you don't, you know, Speedway riders do walk past you, so you can stop them and say, "Oh, well done tonight. Can you have your autograph? Can I do a selfie?" But I suppose that's life, isn't it? The way, you know, the money that's been involved in sports has made it that way.
Yeah, you almost have to be careful what you wish for, don't you? Because actually Speedway could do with bigger crowds and more money, but then, and I'm sure everyone would say that, but you know, would the culture of it change if it was more out there? And there's obviously talk about the Discovery Plus deal, and well, now actually BT possibly getting involved. So surely that's got to be a good thing, though, isn't it, for the sport overall?
I would have thought so, because it will obviously, as long as that merger does go through, it will expand the audience, won't it? Because, and it'd be good to see BT involved again. Yeah, I think they did a very good job of what they were doing, covering particularly the GPs. But equally, I'm sure that you know, Discovery will take it further, because, you know, but I think the merger will help the sport, provided Speedway is considered an important enough sport now for any new merged channel. Like, obviously none of us actually know what is going to happen, but if you look at it, BT have things like Champions League at football. They have other sort of major events. That Eurosport have a lot of the motorcycling, don't they, with the MotoGP and now Speedway. But you just hope that Speedway doesn't get lost within that merger.
They've got the Grand Prix qualifier which I'm going to try and get up to. So I think it's great. Interesting you mentioned Scunthorpe there, because one of the things that, you know, when I do get to meetings, I think you've got, and you know what, I think it's a broad church, and I think there's room for both types. But for me, you've got Glasgow and you've got the Isle of Wight. I know the Isle of Wight's now slightly sort of not quite
Not part of the gang.
not quite part of the gang, but still running what I would call, what I think we'd all call speedway. You go to Glasgow, you go to the Isle of Wight, and there seems to be much more sort of, you know, there's breaks to meet the tiger, or there's kids races and things. You go to Scunthorpe, Rob Godfrey will, as long as he can, will run that meeting, bang, 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 and it's all about the racing. Yes. Now, personally, I'm probably more towards the let's go for the racing because I'm of that age. But clearly, I think we all know if Speedway is going to survive, you've got to get the younger generation in. So, you know, I think whatever works for whichever tracks, go for it. And I think, you know, we should be able to have, you know, maybe on the one side, you know, the Scunthorpes of this world, and on the other side, Isle of Wight and Glasgow.
But equally, Scunthorpe has a large youth following because they've got the practice track.
Yeah, yeah.
So you do get a lot of youngsters in through that.
I think you also raised another interesting point, which I think is, you know, picked up in the book. And I think, you know, people, I think a lot of Speedway supporters now will kind of point the finger at, you know, why aren't the promoters doing this? Why aren't the promoters doing that? You know what? Having spoken to quite a few of them for the book, you know, I think they have a really, really tough job at the moment. I think if you want to point the finger, in my view, maybe point it back 30, 40, 50 years, maybe back to the 70s. There are too many Speedway tracks that are not owned by the people who are promoting Speedway. I mean, I think Scunthorpe, Leicester, I'm not so sure about Redcar. I think Redcar, but you know, it's in a sense the tracks who can go and hold training days as and when. Whereas, as we know, there are, you know, the great majority of tracks in the UK are owned by, I don't know, Greyhounds Association or you know, private enterprises. And you know, if you get a good offer to build housing, or in the old days to build a supermarket, then I'm afraid Speedway gets moved. And you know, as I said, I'm in London. You know, we used to have, when I came down to London, I went to Hackney. Hackney's long gone, Wimbledon's long gone, Rye House is long gone, Arena Essex is long gone. I went down to Kent. I'll now have to go to, I'm not sure you pronounce it, Iwade, for the National Development League, or Oxford, which thankfully has now opened up. But you know, the southeast of England, certainly around London, given there used to be so many tracks, it's just it's a huge shame.
And they did a big track at New Cross as well.
Indeed, and Haringey.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some good posters there in the background. You do cover a lot of the reasons why that might be, Roddy. You know, this whole idea of the kind of vulnerability, really, of clubs and tracks, and the lack of being able to look more than a few years ahead and be able to see what the shape of the sport's going to be. I mean, you mentioned vision in the book, and you mentioned about the running of the sport, and there's a theme for me there that comes up about an independent running of Speedway in this country instead of the BSPA or BSP Limited now. And that came out for me quite strong, that actually that there's a danger that there's a self-interest there that could be stopping us from having a much clearer policy strategy direction for the sport in this country. Is that something that was a big thing for you?
It came over quite a lot from the fans that I talked to. And I think, you know, it's a problem that always, or it's an issue that always comes up. You know, why is it the promoters themselves who are running the sport? You know, why isn't there, I don't know, a Bernie Eccleston or a, you know, someone who can come in and be independent? Now, you know, I don't want to turn this into a Scottish sport roundup, but having an independent body, and I'm looking at the main body that runs Scottish football, doesn't necessarily mean that everything's going to be a bed of roses. But for me, we all form our own opinions. I do think that having someone else doing the marketing for British Speedway would make a big difference. You know, I think the individual promoters have a really tough job, you know, keeping their own tracks going, marketing their own tracks to keep them in business. Because as we know, you know, the days of, you know, really big crowds at British Speedway tracks, apart from maybe the Cardiff Grand Prix, are sadly long gone at the moment. But I do think having someone independent on the marketing side would help. I think we've all seen the difference that having Rob and Vicky Rob Painter and Vicky Blackwell in charge of the Great Britain Speedway team in terms of professionalising it both off the track and on the track. That has really made a difference. So for me personally, I would almost say the marketing would be best. But again, marketing costs money, and there isn't a lot of spare money around.
Yeah.
220 people come through the door. You don't need a mathematician
Yeah.
to kind of work out that, you know, you're on a loser straight away. And I turned away 100 plus 140 people at the gate because they wanted to pay cash, but we weren't allowed to pay cash.
Oh, okay.
You know, just you know, and then there were so many things against us. We had the tractors and everything burnt out as well. You know, we had vandalism, and it wasn't just the speedway; it was the dogs as well. They had all their computers stolen, and it was a lot. There was a gypsies that moved in the back car park. They moved in there for a few weeks. Of course, prime target was us, and they targeted it, and they did. It was just devastating. Of course, we had the roadworks as well. You know, all around there, they're doing all the building for the Olympics and stuff, and it was just one thing after another. And you know, as I say, I literally pulled it on. I think it was May time.
Right.
And I phoned Rob Godfrey, and I just said, look, mate, you know, I know there's problems with Eastbourne, Poole, Wolverhampton. I said, but I need a month. He said, no, he said originally, are you going to pull out? And I said, I think we're going to have to. He said, well, I'll give you a month. Let's see what it looks like. Because this was a pandemic. It was the pandemic that was causing us the problem.
Yeah.
And the older generation weren't coming out. And I just said, look, all right, let's give me that few weeks just to kind of get our head back round and see what we can do. Obviously, we couldn't do anything with the pandemic. We were waiting on Boris Johnson to kind of let everything loose again. It just wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And then, of course, every week that goes past, you're delaying a meeting. So then you're on a backlog because we're on a cut-off date. If we don't get in that cut-off date, you end up getting a fine. So whichever way around, we were pushed to kind of get that completed. So every week we were like, we're not going to run. We're not going to run. It was like, wow, we're getting closer to that. To that point where we're like, we're going to end up getting fined if we're not careful. So I had all these implications that people didn't see behind the scenes that were that could possibly cause us another issue after another issue. So we decided to come back, and then you know, again, you know, I said, you know, if you don't come out, you know, there won't be any. And by Christ, we had a bloody good crowd that night. You know, we were like, here we go, we're back on the track again. But the damage had already been done.
Constantly on the phone. So I kind of think it is a big thing, and but I think it's not only that. I think, you know, we need to try and make it more entertaining for not just 15 races. There needs to be a lot of other stuff going on. I don't know if you watched any of that cricket 100.
Oh, 100, yeah.
I'm not a big fan of cricket. I've never really watched it. I always found it boring. But I think this summer I probably watched like 3 days on the trot of that, just because it was entertaining. And I think if we can do something like that with Speedway in the future, then it'll make a difference.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, I mean, I'm in Nottingham, so I've got Trent Bridge, you know, big test ground just around the corner. I can walk to it in half an hour. And they had a 100 team. I didn't watch a lot of that, but we used to always go a lot as a group to the T20. Brilliant Friday night, some beers after work, just sat out in the summer sunshine, and it was. But yeah, as you say, and the other podcast to do is snooker, and they have an event they've just had it, which you may or may not have heard of, but they had one called the Shootout. And it's like a pub audience. It's like darts almost, where you've got lots of cheering and shouting, which isn't in there for the other tournaments.
No, that sounds pretty. That's sort of snooker I could go watch, I reckon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like they get limited time to play the shots. It kind of starts at like 15 seconds and then down to 10 seconds a shot. So it's really moving, and then it's a 10-minute frame, and that's the match. 10 minutes.
That sounds pretty good. Yeah, I think it's important. We're lucky that it's a sport that's fast paced, and you know, it doesn't take a lot of you can be pretty I don't know how you say it. You can be, you know, I don't know how you say it. Like someone who you can not have a lot of patience, but still be to it, you know. And it's an exciting sport, but I mean, there's still a fair bit that needs to be done to make it the sort of sport that will be on TV, you know, every week or a few times a week, and to get big crowds back in.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because when you know it and you see it, you know how great it is, but it's how do you get people to take notice? And yeah, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, that book I talked about, the interesting point was they were saying about who was running the sport and therefore having a vision for where it goes in this country. And I don't think they were being critical, but they were saying that, you know, the promoters are pretty much the guys who come together to make the big decisions about how it runs. But they've all got their own interest in their own track, and there's not an independent body almost looking at it going, look, here's a 5-year vision, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to market it, we're going to pay someone to market it and brand it. You kind of think, you know, it's yeah, it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot over the years, and of course we're not even seeing, you know, the Grand Prix riders anymore. We don't really see many of those in British Speedway. So you even the top stars that you think, okay, these are the guys who are marketable, you don't see them very much in this country either, which again can't really help, can it?
No, I don't think it does. I think next year in particular is going to be better. Obviously, we got Doyley's back and Max Frick's coming back. I think Kilderman's back as well, which is, you know, they're big names, which is going to attract people in. And you know, it's such a shame 2020 didn't happen, because obviously with Crumpy and Nicky coming back, I think that would have pulled in quite a lot of people for all the home meetings, but you know, the away meetings. How many people are going to go along to watch Nicky ride around their home track? I think it would have been pretty awesome. But yeah, it's unfortunate it didn't happen. But yeah, I think there's been a lot of progress on the social media side of it, and I think Nigel Pearson's had a big part to play with that, which is good. But you know, I think there probably needs to be someone else to kind of help push the actual show on at the meetings and bring in some new ideas, and yeah, just some simple stuff like when you see walk-on musics at the darts and everyone, that's like the highlights you see on YouTube is walk-ons. So
yeah, that's true.
even if I try and